The following meeting took place on Wednesday, September 5th at the Crystal City High School. It was held by Mayor Tom Schilly to inform concerned citizens about a smelter development located at the former PPG industrial site. This video contains edited clips of that evening's events and focuses on the issue of pollution. This is the first in a series of videos that will focus on the concerns of the city signing a long-term lease without feasibility studies or fully educating the citizens.
St. Louis has a problem with smog. So certain types of pollutants, and in this case it's nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds, the facility is going to move into this area, and that's in Jefferson County, St. Charles, Franklin, St. Louis County, or the city of St. Louis. Then they're required to find offsets for their emissions of those nitrogen oxides and VOCs. Now those can come from other places in the area, so when I speak of a net reduction, that would be a net reduction throughout the area.
I mean, what do we actually have? I mean, what are the long-term effects? What are we looking at? I mean, because that's the stuff that we're not hearing what the long-term is going to be.
Well, we don't have the permit applications yet, so we don't have any specific information about what the emissions from this proposed facility will be. I can tell you generally when you're speaking of coal, as I mentioned earlier, you're talking about nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds that can contribute to smog formation. We would probably be concerned about particulate matter. You might read in the papers about fine particles that you can breathe deeply into your lungs and can cause lung respiratory conditions or problems. So those are probably some of the major things. But without specific information on the facility, I can't tell you every single pollutant that will be of interest.
The 5 areas that you discussed with us that would be measured, one of them was air pollution. Does that also cover noise abatement?
Actually, I'd like to clarify, when I discuss the 5 areas, those are the 5 environmental media areas that our division deals with, but they won't necessarily all come into play for this facility. And no, we do not have statutory authority to address noise abatement through DNR.
Who does?
I'm not sure about that.
We have some areas in our county that have been grandfathered, and the Shapiro junkyard's one of them. And I live on Mississippi Avenue, and I can tell you I can hear them. I can almost hear them talking to each other, as a matter of fact. Also, on a good night, we can hear Peabody cars running around the track. So I don't want another noise issue in my community, and I'm sure that can be addressed. It's expensive, isn't it, Mr. Kennedy? So I hope that you will take that into consideration, or have you? Yes, what? Well, I have another question for you while you're up, so go ahead.
The engineering group, Daniele Corus, will work that out, and obviously it's got to be something that will work with the community. So if we're going to move in here, we have to be good neighbors, so whatever is required is what we're going to do.
And no, we do not have statutory authority to address noise abatement through
Who does?
DNR.
Who does?
I'm not sure about that.
Is this a 24/7 operation?
Yes, it will be.
So all night long, every night?
Yeah, but I don't really think it's going to be awfully noisy. Do you hear Rush Island at all?
Well, I don't live that close to Rush Island. I live 2 blocks from your facility.
It's going to be a lot more like Rush Island than anything else.
Well, I'll have to go down there, I guess, and sit around and listen for it.
Project is at a certain level of air emissions. It will be what we call a major source, if this is a major source, as I discussed. The other requirement on a major source, if this facility, this proposed project would end up being a major source.
Ms. Tibbetts Mosby, I have a question for you. When you kept saying this proposal would be a major source, you kept using the terms major source. Are you saying major source of pollution?
When we deal with air pollution permitting issues, we have 3 different levels of permitting. We have what's called de minimis sources, that's the lowest amount of emissions. We have minor sources, and that's medium, and then major sources. The major sources emit over a certain threshold of various pollutants, and that kicks them in essentially to that process. If this, I don't know if this facility is a major source or not yet because we haven't received a permit application. But if it is, then it would be subject to the very strictest requirements that we have, including the offsets that I mentioned and the lowest achievable emission rate in terms of applying pollution control technology.
So if this is a major source of pollution, that's hypothetically because we have no permits, assumably the council and people making the decisions would know this information, even though the permits haven't been done. Then what this project would do would bring a major source of pollution to our area. And if that major source of pollution to our area is equal to what Rush Island is,
It's going to be a lot more like Rush Island than anything else.
and if that major source of pollution to our area is equal to what Rush Island is, what we're effectively doing is doubling the pollution for the Crystal City area. Would that be an accurate statement?
I don't think so, but I can't answer any questions specific to the amount of pollution because I don't have any information to indicate what the emissions from this facility would be.
And you're from the Department of Natural Resources, and you don't know whether or not this pollution is going to be doubled.
Ma'am? Without permits being issued, I'll say it, without permits being issued, they don't know what it's going to be, without knowing.
If the city signs over the land prior to the issuance of permits, it will be too late. The time for your voice to be heard is prior to the city engaging in a long-term lease.
As you will hear later this evening, the development of this site will be under strict scrutiny of the city, Department of Natural Resources, both as to the restrictions now in place and the permit process, and the Environmental Protection Agency.
It's very possible that the emission standards could be lowered for this particular site because the region would enable it to do that. It's possible. Thank you.
Fear factor. The fear of the unknown is fearful itself. Without permits being issued, I'll say it, without permits being issued, they don't know what it's going to be, without knowing.
Well, we don't have the permit applications yet, so we don't have any specific information about what the emissions from this proposed facility will be.
The future liability issues of the land. If Crystal City now owns it, Crystal City will be responsible for any cleanup. And I think that's taxpayer money, and that's what I think we should have a say in. So to say it's a private enterprise, it is now city-owned, therefore it is a public concern.
The city is also in final negotiations with Wings Enterprise, a Missouri corporation, for its long-term lease of the property.
And I know this seems to be a new process of smelting, whatever you want to call it. Then you have no real experience in what the emissions may be. You're saying you're building the first one or something in Brazil, and I know they're building some new ones in China. 80 years ago, St. Joe didn't know that lead was a problem. I live here, I live a block and a half from this site. If anybody wants it, my house will be for sale. Thank you very much. But on the EPA side, I know there's an EPA representative here. Just on previous smelting plants in Michigan and Wisconsin, I believe, that are up near the Great Lakes, it took over 11 years from finding there was a problem with toxins to coming up with rules to make them abide by them, and then telling them what they needed to do to fix that. They had another 3 years. So that's an 11-year process from finding a problem to actually trying to get a solution, and all of that was to reduce emissions by 42%. I don't want to breathe the other 58 while you're trying to figure that out.